living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Wow, I guess it's that time already. I should jump in here and get going on this thing, I suppose. It comes up so quick that last minute before showtime just flies right by. There's oh, did I get this? Did I do that? Do I have enough coffee? Is my cigar lit? Is the microphone going to work? Do I have to restart everything? Just all that stuff that hits you at that very last minute of the show. It just just before the show, and it just hits you. It comes at you fast. Welcome to the show. It is Toward Anarchy. I'm Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's a pleasure to do it. We do this here every Sunday live, 1 to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Republic Broadcasting Network. It's such a pleasure to be able to do it. It really is. I have a lot of fun with it, and I get to work out a lot of who I am and what I'm dealing with from week to week, the things that I'm thinking about. A lot of times we won't always have someone to talk to get those things out. Not everybody has a therapist. Not everybody has that significant other or that person that they can rely on, that best friend, whoever it is, that can listen. Even if they are a best friend, maybe they're not the greatest listener. And so while they're the best friend, they're not the person that you talk to all the time about your thing. And so I have my own very little therapeutic office thing going on right here. It's quite fantastic. And I love to cover the things that are fun to me. And that'll be the case today on the show. Talking to Sherry Voluntary. She'll join me in about half an hour. Jump into the conversation. We'll talk primarily about the state of mental health under the COVID-19 reality. That's really what it is, this reality that we currently live in. And that reality is, aside from whether it's real or not, whether you believe it's real or not, whether it's impacted you directly or not, whether you think it's manipulated or not, that reality exists. We're living under it, and people are dealing with it in different ways, and there are mental health issues always, but something like this can push people. It can bring those things to the surface in other people that didn't already have them. Sometimes that can be the case, or they, it's just, it could be the straw, the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. That's absolutely what it could be. And so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about communications, and we'll talk about broadcasting. She's a host, co-host, different shows, radio like this, actual commercial radio, in that sense, not just the turn on the microphone and click go Facebook Live or YouTube. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. Believe me, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm absolutely 100% for everybody doing it and trying to find your voice in that way. But that difference in having to deal with timing, having to concern yourself with the potential of offending an advertiser or the network or something like that. So there's all those other considerations that go along with it, along with the fact that they're really trying, if you click that Facebook Live, boy, I think you probably have to be real careful about what you say. I caught a ban on the social media on Facebook here, 3-day ban, and it hurt. It wasn't just me not being able to participate, but it obviously knocked me down to some levels socially, because whereas I was getting a dozen or more, a lot more on some days, requests every single day, it was to the point there I wasn't able to keep up with it, that I was just sort of okay, here we'll see if it. I'm unfollowing people within minutes is what was happening, but just accepting those friend requests and then that ban, it it killed it. It just killed it. And so I've spent the last week sort of trying to rebuild my reputation, as it were, put out the posts and get the likes and the shares to get my whatever my social media score, whatever they're using in the background, whatever algorithm they're using to get back to where I'm getting that massive influx of friend requests again, because that's a pretty good indication that your posts are showing up on your other friends' pages, that you're being seen in places because you're getting the friend requests. It's not just and of course what goes along with it is you see the likes, the shares, the follows. And along with that, I have to ask you, do that. Take that time right now. It's something that I've been personally working on to improve myself, because in particular, my main way of watching a lot of content, even like YouTube, stuff like that, is to turn on the Xbox and use the app on it. And it actually takes 8 or so clicks of a button to get to like something from somebody. You have to wake the thing up, and then you have to pop up the menu, and then you have to move up the menu and select a different menu and move over in that menu, and finally you can select like. So it's something that I'm actually having to think about and consciously make that effort, because even if I'm just watching music or something like that, I'm trying to remember to just throw that like up there. And I'm asking you to do the same. Take that conscious effort, because that, out of all the metrics of all that, we're number 13 in the philosophy category in New Zealand. I think it's fantastic. I have no idea what it means. There are only just so many metrics when the show it's live, as it is right now. Although you may not be listening to it live by the time you get to it. After that, it goes all around the world on Spotify and Pandora and YouTube and TuneIn and Spreaker and iHeartRadio and all these places all around the world, and all these different kind of apps and things that people are installing on their phones just to listen. And so there's no real metric, but there are some, and some are more reliable. And I don't know about the New Zealand thing, but it is factual. One of the metrics that I've played around with using, trying to figure out just how many people are listening every week, and it popped back and it said that we're number 13 in New Zealand under the philosophy category. I thought that was kind of neat. I just, it, and it's all just because somebody somewhere shared it with somebody in New Zealand, presumably, that's listening. I don't know. Maybe it's VPNs, these virtual private networks where you have. You click a little program, like I have one that's called Phantom Peer that I use occasionally. I'm not trying to hide my communications across the internet with anyone. I'm not doing anything illegal. That's not the point. That's not to say that people shouldn't be watching, all these different arguments. It's just to say that I don't, because the point is that I get it. If you don't want something to be seen out in the world, the best way to do that is not to do it across your computer that's connected to a network, because you have no idea who or what. You just assume that everybody is watching, all the corporations, all the governments. But it could be through a VPN, somebody listening on their computer through a VPN. It makes it look like that they're listening to the show through New Zealand, but it could be New Zealanders. I've looked at some of the more reliable metrics in Australia and France and New Zealand, places like that. There are listeners, there are visitors to the website, there are people tuning into the show. So it's really cool. And that's where you have to do the like, shares, follow, subscribe, whatever it is, whatever platform you're listening on. And if you're not doing it, why? Why are you listening to the show and not sharing it? Think about it. Either do something better with your time, or share the information, whether you like it or whether you don't, and let people make that decision for themselves. Let the friends who you think might like it or might find something valuable in it have their chance to hear it, to see if it's interesting or not. There's so much to talk about, and I try to talk about a bunch of different things every week, and they're just all things that's happened to me throughout the week. And it's great to have Sherry Voluntary coming up on the show here in just about 20 minutes. She'll join me, she asked me what I wanted to talk about, and generally I don't have any sort of planned conversation with it. I mean, if it's a director, I'm probably going to talk about their movie. If it's an author, I'm probably going to talk about their book. But Sherry is an activist, a voluntarist, in case you couldn't tell by the name. Dare I say anarchist? Uh, she's a communicator. She's been at this for a while. She's one of those female voices that is special and important for all the right reasons. I mean, really, there's everything of value that comes with having the female perspective on these ideas and these thoughts is absolutely what's brought to the table when we talk to these women. They all have these. Certainly, for me, I try to be. It's funny. I call myself a student of people. I watch people, but the reality is that my understanding of people comes much more from my own understanding of myself, and just living my own life and knowing who I am in my head, and really accepting it, or changing the things about myself that I don't like. And I just am who I am, and I just sort of get life, and I take it really easily, and too easily for some people. It's definitely been an area of conflict over in my existence, that I'm a slacker, I guess. That's a term that is popular for my generation. It, I suppose it's not really true. I absolutely am fully energized anytime I want to be, and energized and into what it is that I'm doing at any given time. And I have no problem getting up and doing hard labor. In fact, I had to get myself a job, uh, another job to support my habit. This is how many times has this happened to me in my life? And in this case, it's the usual habit. It's comic books. And so I just acquired a new job. There's a new contract for a company that I've done some work for over the years, that they just acquired to handle stocking magazines and periodicals in places, stores. I don't want to name any of the stores, places in and around my area, and that's something that I've done off and on all my life. It's great because it keeps me active. There's there's that activity thing, just having to lift the magazines, or the candy. I've done candy and soda and a couple of things like that over the years. Complete resets in stores, or just coming in and stocking them and keeping them arranged and cleaned up every week. And there's that aspect of it, but there's that I'm generally alone unless it's a big job. And obviously that's perfect for me, right? Unless it's a big job, a massive job, a large store like a Walmart or something along those lines. I'm generally alone. I handle my business. I just go. I'm on my own schedule within reason. In this case, the magazines, the periodicals are released on I believe Tuesday and Wednesday. It depends. It's a little different in certain places, but basically, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday are my busy days that I'm basically scheduled, whatever you want to call it. Those are the points that I'm expected to have new things out and on the shelf, because we will get the magazines. They're delivered to the store. That's one of the other great things. I don't even have to deliver any of this product or anything. It's all already there waiting at the store. But I had to get another job, so I'm not afraid of work, and I'm not afraid of labor. I've built a barn before. I've done roofs. I've dug ditches for plumbing. I've not afraid to work. None of these things fear me, but I am definitely a person who enjoys what I want to enjoy, and if I like it, I will certainly put a lot more effort into it than I will if it's something that I don't like, and I'm happily ready to admit that, and that's why I have what some people would call a spotty career path, but not really. I mean, you can see 2 years here, 2 years there, that sort of thing, but not much longer than that. It's me trying things, doing things either out of necessity in the literal sense that I have to have a job and the bills need to be paid, or it's something that I've been interested, for instance, working in electronics. I worked for a number of years for a large electronics company, and I did all sorts of things for them. I did everything from sales to marketing to actually helping with creating and troubleshooting the technology, building their website. It went from, I was hired initially to build the website, and it went from there. And I did a number of things. It even afforded me the opportunity to fly overseas and see the parent company, and there was all kinds of things that happened with that. So I've put in my time trying to do and find the things that I like, and you could call me Mike of all trades. I've done a lot of. I made a list years ago. It must have been a decade ago, and I've done a number of neat and interesting things for career wise in the last decade, and those wouldn't have been included in that list. And it must have been 25 or 30 different things, literal things. And it goes for everything from that sort of job at the age of 15, working at Burger King, to okay, that job's no longer available, to working for one day at the pizza joint around the corner, but I thought the guy that worked there was kind of a prick, so I didn't come back after lunch. It includes all of those and every single one of those experiences along the way. And I don't necessarily think that I would trade any of them, because they are a part of me. They are who I am, so I don't make any excuse for me being a slacker and not having that. There's some people, my buddy Dwayne, okay, he's a cautionary tale. My best friend Dwayne, and I just spoke to him this week, and we speak every couple of months or something like that, but we'll talk for a couple of hours. And his is a cautionary tale. He has been in the optical business. He was in the optical business when we were about 16 years old. That's when he first got a job cutting lenses for a place that the parent company was here. I can't remember the name, but we were in Denver, but this was here. The parent company for the company that he was working for was here in Topeka. I found some of their old advertising merchandise in a secondhand store from many years back, and so that was kind of neat. A little one of those synergy things in my life, just coming across that and going, Dufferin, that was the name of it, I think. I know that's one of the companies that he worked for, but I want to say that was the one that was here. But at any rate, he had a job at around the age of 16, first acquired this trade that he would be in for most of his life up until just before COVID. His last job in optics ended, and he had been there for a number of years, and he was successful at it, and also extremely hard worker, much more willing to put up with the nonsense of the public in that sense, because he served the public directly as an optician. And for many years, but then that job disappeared, and it's happened over the years. There was another job. He's left to start his own businesses, done things like that. He's rolled the dice too on different ideas and projects and jobs over the years. And while he can say he has a bigger house and they have a couple of nicer cars, that's it. His life is not particularly any different than my own. We were talking just the other day, and he was talking about how they were having to fight to make every dime, he and his wife at this time, to make the bills work, but that they were doing it. We have just about 10 minutes until Sherry Voluntary joins us, and we will be right back here on Toward Anarchy. Point your browser to towardanarchy.com. That's the place, as always, to follow along. Towardanarchy.com. If you are there on the front page, you'll see it. Well, if you're live with me, it's December 20th, and you can click on the link there, and it will take you to today's show page. Where, if you share that link, there's a button right there. There's several buttons up right there. It'll create a link for your email. It'll pop up whatever your default client is, and slap the link in there. It'll drop it in Twitter. It'll drop it in Facebook, and there's a whole bunch of others in there. If you just click that share button, it pulls up the share this menu, and there's all those places on there. Blogger, wherever you're at. I don't even know what half of these things are. I know what Pinterest is. I've heard of Telegram, TikTok, of course, TripAdvisor. I don't know why you'd want to share my link on TripAdvisor, but by all means, share the page on to TripAdvisor, and who knows? It's a great road listening music. A couple hours. You have a couple hour trip to go somewhere. Music show. There, I have a little bit of music, I suppose, if you're catching the live. If you're catching it on any of the archive, the music is cut out because I don't want to have to fight with the. I ended up doing it with YouTube here just a week ago, and I actually ended up pulling a video, and now I have to repost it and re-edit it and repost it up there, and it's not that big of a deal, but when you have to do it, it's a big of enough deal. You'll see if you go to towardanarchy.com, December 20th is what you're looking for. Sherry Voluntary, she's a talk show host and another of these true ladies of liberty. She'll be my guest here. She'll join us in just about 5 minutes. She's hanging out in the green room, as it were, the digital green room. All I have to do is invite her into the conversation. We'll talk about the current state of mental health here in the COVID reality and some other things. There's, of course, a link there to follow Sherry on her Sherry Voluntary page on Facebook, and as well as her latest show is called Talking Trashed, with her partner Derek T, and they get trashed and they talk trash, and one of these free form. Just a couple of buddies. It was really what's made. It's what's passed for broadcasting news and information for some time now. The normal guy, the conversation where you're just doing you. There's no pretense to the show. There's not a performance per se, so much as there is just a couple of people who want to talk about some issues. And speaking of that, I was on one of those shows here Friday before last. I had been telling you about it, and I've been excited about the fact that it was coming up, and it finally happened. And I have the link for you. Up there, it was the echo chamber that I was on. It was with Roger Sanchez, and he invited myself and Agora Roger, a different Roger, to come on the show and discuss capitalism and agorism. Given the few things, the last month, maybe 2 months, off and on, it's been a topic of conversation for myself on the show. Just sort of trying to suggest that we don't have to sacrifice our words like capitalism or anarchy to the people who misuse them and abuse them, and the people who use those tools, those ideas, for things that we would consider violations of the individual, whether it's non-aggression principle or whatever ideology that you might subscribe to, in the sense that we tend to all agree on. We all, whether we even understand this or even have an ideology, it's that we tend to just not go around messing with other people and their property. And then last week I was talking about, just in passing, the antitrust suit against Facebook, and now there's another big suit against Google, and that's the third one in a number of months, and just against Google alone. But specifically, I had mentioned Facebook last week, and I lacked a little bit of nuanced understanding of what was going on, and I came across this piece when I was looking around on Politico, and so I shared it, and I just thought it was a fair generalized look at what is happening, what the antitrust suit is about, and who's waging it and why, and what. And it talks about some of the arguments against it, and it's a nuanced thing. It most certainly is, like a lot of this stuff is. I as always, I try to share these quotes and these memes, and I don't always make sure to mention them, but I wanted to on this because as soon as Sherry Voluntary joins me here in just a couple of minutes, we're going to have at least some of this conversation will be about mental health and the COVID-19 reality. And there's this great meme that I came across this week, and it's about coronavirus symptoms. It's what are your coronavirus symptoms? The doctor is asking, and the guy is dejected and looking down as he's sitting on the table. He says, "I'm broke, unemployed, and suicidal." We'll talk about that with Sherry Voluntary when we come back on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com. Look for December 20th, and you will see Sherry Voluntary is my guest. She is a talk show host, and like I said, one of these true ladies of liberty that has really been a pleasure to be able to introduce to you, to bring to you, to talk about, get some of these ideas and these views, just that female perspective on things. We've talked about it before, the importance of different views. I have this thing about diversity that we'll have to mention, and I think the difference between diversity as in what I call diversity and what the public might call diversity in trying to reach things like equality and outcome, and in this topic that it's a regular topic that comes up when you bump up against any sort of liberal individual. But it was interesting coming up to this week because I don't necessarily ever typically plan any particular conversation. It's just about what is happening and who I'm talking to. But Sherry, you brought up to me initially that you didn't know what we were going to talk about. You wanted to know what we might talk about. And I said, of course, that there's no real plan on anything. But then you mentioned the COVID health crisis thing that we're having right now. And it's something that's been on my mind for sure. And so it was really great when you brought that up as just a general sort of topic, something that we can lead into. So we will definitely dive into that. But Sherry, thank you for joining me, and tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you come from and how you get to be punished being on the show here with me today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a Southerner, as you can tell, probably. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And my family's still there mostly. I've lived all over New York, Wisconsin, Michigan, Colorado, and I'm back in Tennessee now. I guess I could tell you a little bit about how I became an anarchist.
Yeah.
So when I moved back to Tennessee about 18 years ago, I was kind of a talk radio junkie, and I started listening to this guy out of Atlanta called Neil Bortz. And some of you know him. He wrote the Fair Tax book and stuff. And he's a party. He's like a big L libertarian. And so I was already kind of feeling like I was a Republican. I was already feeling like, the Republican Party didn't suit me and it didn't really fit me. Like, I didn't leave it. It sort of left me. Because I actually did believe that the government should be small and that business should, and people should be able to conduct business without a bunch of interference from the government. So I was already questioning it. Then I started listening to him, and he would talk about eminent domain a lot. And I had never heard of eminent domain. I don't know. I was young. I guess I wasn't paying attention, but when I heard that, I just could not believe that the government could do that and do it lawfully. So that really kind of started me down the path to libertarianism. I don't think I became an actual libertarian for many years yet, though I thought I was. But once my ex-husband started listening to Tom Woods, and he was reading Ayn Rand, and he would listen to this guy out of Minnesota, and Tom would substitute for him sometimes. And about 4 months after that, we were both anarchists. So it didn't take long. So that was a real worldview change for me, and just seeing that it just because things are the way they are and that's the way they run right now doesn't mean that they have to be run that way, and that there are many, many better solutions than government ones. So that's a little bit about me. And
That's great. I think it's great that you pointed out and that you mentioned being a Republican, because the network we're on for the live show that we're actually alive right now. Woo!
hi, everybody.
Yeah, we may not be by the time that you actually hear this, but at the moment we are, and a lot of people that listen to the network would identify as right-wing Republican,
Sure.
libertarian leaning. Definitely people who would feel as you did that the party left them behind, that they sacrificed these lofty ideals that they once had for socialism and a place at the table, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I always say, like, and this is my kind of my advice to the Libertarian Party all the time, is to remember that the Libertarian Party should be around to knock the table over, not become part of the want a place at the table. And that's how I got involved in radio, by the way, was through the Libertarian Party, which I was in for a brief time. But I do think there are a lot of things that people who are Republicans, the rhetoric of Republicans is often very much in line with what a libertarian might say. But when it comes down to, well, how, what are your beliefs about carrying this out? There are many, many things where Republicans say, well, we've got to do it this way. We've got to force people as well. So, they often think they're in a much better position than liberals. But if you're forcing people, your good ideas on people, then you're off the bounds of what freedom is about. So
Well, it seems to be.
Reconsider that.
Well, yeah, doesn't it seem to be very contradictory to the very values that the party is supposedly supposed to uphold? But that is the problem with the statist in general,
Right.
whether left or right, is that they're trying to do good, and they don't see the massive amount of bad, evil, negative things that are produced by supporting the system that they support. And
Yes.
we all we can do is communicate and start a new radio show and do a thing and
Absolutely.
put it out there and hope somebody hears it. And you've been doing that for a while. So you worked for the Libertarian Party and radio ultimately, then, kind of. I mean, that was your goal. And
not for the party. I was involved. I had just gotten involved in the party here locally. Somebody talked me into it, and I was really reticent to do it. But he said, we need an anarchist in there to kind of bring these people back to the core, the root. That's what radical means, to the root. And that's what, as an anarchist, you do, is you get to the root. Do you believe in freedom, or do you not? And I would say that libertarianism is sort of, if you believe in property rights, then you can be a libertarian, but you have to be committed to that all the way. And that's really what sets libertarianism apart, is the philosophy part of it, and that it's not about issues. And so I guess we were talking about how I got to the radio show. The radio station, a local talk station here, had a spot open. And one of the guys that was a producer down there said, hey, why don't we get some libertarians on the radio in here? It was a conservative talk radio station, and they often think libertarians are something else. And so they did. They had two of the guys that were running the party said yes, they'd like to give it a try. And they asked me to come on board with them. And then we did a little pilot, and we got the show. And I was able to, yell about things on the radio for 7 months. So that's really happy.
That's great. I have to say, in all the years I've done this, typical terrestrial sort of FM stations that I've worked on, I was never able to really, I never got to do anything, certainly for 7 months, on any sort of regular basis, where I was telling people about any of the things that I believed in. I was just selling music and selling commercials and everything that was going on. So that's great. That's really good to hear.
5 days a week. It was my, it took over my life, basically. It was a lot of work, but I mean, I couldn't pass up the opportunity, because I had tons of people who listened because they hated me, and then they would message me and say, I started listening to you because I hated what you were saying, and then I recognized you were right. The more I listened, the more I watched the news, I started saying, and these are conservative people. These aren't like, libertarians or leftists or anything. These are conservatives that would message me and say, I see what you're saying now about the problems with police, or, a myriad of other things. But so to me, that was a huge win for me personally.
That's great. The Libertarian Party needs to remember that its roots are anarchy. I mean, its founders were anarchists. This show, Toward Anarchy, that was literally one of the first slogans and logos. The general logo that I've taken, the A with the arrow pointing through it, suggested for the Libertarian Party. It is absolutely of their roots. And if you look at Libertarian Party history, you can see the arrow pointing in a lot of their logos. They don't use the A, but the arrow points up to that upper, what used to be the maximum freedom, the anarchy quadrant of the test.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely believe that we are born to resist these things, and that particularly with the Republicans, that rebellion is their true American heritage.
Right.
Absolutely. It is. It's what their ideals are framed around, I believe.
That's where the rhetoric comes from. And that's why, for me, coming from the right, I think that an effective way to talk to other, to conservatives, I'm not a conservative, but to conservatives, is that, to use that rhetoric, because the rhetoric is right. When you talk about individual liberty, all these things, like that's something you can hold that mirror up to people. I've often said there's a great photograph that I always loved, and it was this line of, like, they're police, but they're all in masks, and they've got their shields. They don't look human anymore. And it's in some Eastern European country, and there's an old lady standing in front of one of them, and she's got a mirror, and she's just holding it up to him, and she's just standing there peacefully holding this mirror. And I think that's always been my idea of what I want to do with any sort of whatever activism that I do, is just to hold that mirror up to people and say, okay, this is what you say you believe. Now, fulfill that, be committed to it, because if we have to suspend the free market principles in order to save the free market, like George Bush said. What a ridiculous thing to say. And that you're accepting that from these overlords it's unconscionable. And yes, Republicans, conservatives, you have to be committed to that. And if you're not, then what are you really doing it for? Like, what's really your ambition? Is it do you really want to live free, or do you want to make other people live in a way that you like? And so I think that's where, being a partisan is a really bad thing to do, in my opinion, because you get sucked into issues. Get back to your core values and see how different we actually are. If you get back to your core values, I think you'll see that anarchists, at least, anarcho-capitalist, market anarchists, people, not the bomb throwing types, but people who are concerned with people actually living free, I think you're going to see that you don't actually disagree, and that you just have to find your commitment to those principles, even in the face of things you don't like. And so a good example is, gay marriage. I know a lot of people. I mean, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, y'all. It's Bubba Central, and people. There's a lot of it's very conservative Republican. What passes for conservative Republican these days, and they hated the fact that gay marriage was passed by the Supreme Court. Okay, maybe that was the wrong channels, if you will, through the system that stacks the deck. But is it the right thing? Ask yourself, should government be involved in people's relationships at all? Is it an appropriate use of government? If even, saying you want government, okay, is that what you really want them for? Does it really affect your marriage between you and your spouse and God, if you will, if other people have a different arrangement? No. So, I think people get bogged down in these issues, and they don't get back to their core values of, hey, maybe it's live and let live a little bit. Maybe this isn't the government's job.
Well, and that's the breakdown with particularly I have to hold the conservatives and the Republicans and the libertarians to the fire on these issues because they're the ones that supposedly hold the more I guess conservative values is that
Sure.
in terms of managing government and keeping people supposedly out of your business, but it's the same person who says, why do I have to pay for welfare or abortions or public
Right.
schools? That same person that when I say I don't want to fund the police or I don't want to fund the military will ask me if I like being able to drive on roads.
Right.
So they obviously don't understand one how roads are paid for at all
Right.
to ask that question, but then they also don't understand what it means when they're saying that it's okay to take from others for
Right.
their thing but not when it's somebody else's thing.
Right. Yeah. Any kind of violence, and that's what taxation is. It comes
Mm.
down to force and violence. Because try not paying your taxes and see what happens. Anything that you legitimize for your use is also legitimized for the other guy. So this is why I don't have a lot of sympathy right now for the people who are upset about the election, the people who wanted Trump to win. Because so often when I talk to those people, their answer to any grievance you might have is not, well, yes, you have a point. This is a bad thing and we need to change it. It's, well, it's the best in the world and you can just move to Somalia if you don't like it, that kind of thing. And so I'm saying to them now, well, I guess you can just leave if you don't like it. Like, you legitimize this process by using it. And then when you don't like it, and I'm not saying there's not any corruption. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not even going to get into that. But the fact that, you're saying that to other people when they call up the grievances that about stuff going on in the states that, I don't know, all of a sudden you care about and you want our support. And I'm looking at you like, I guess, don't do that. Don't be involved in this system.
Oh, but they make hypocrites of themselves
Yeah.
every 4 years. Each side flips back and forth. What the one was accusing the other of in the last election, the other's accusing this one of in this election, and it's It's this ridiculous back and forth where they keep pretending that it's actually working and that they're even choosing the people in the first place. Because
Right.
I'm pretty sure there are a lot more people than two or even three in the nation, but by the time I get the poll, I get three to choose from.
Right. Yeah. And that's somehow freedom. Yeah. It's, I've talked a lot about the political process. People often will get angry with me because I don't vote and I don't say that that's a good thing. But look,
Wait, hold that thought on the
sure.
voting. We gotta slip off into a break. We're talking to Sherry Voluntary. We'll be right back here on Toward Anarchy. We were having a good little laugh during the break that you won't get to be a part of. Sorry, you just don't get to see everything. We try to share as much of it as possible. We're catching the video on this one, so it'll be up on YouTube and any place else that we can manage to find it and post it up there and just try to get the word out. Go to towardanarchy.com if you want to follow along. December 20th. Up there are links that you can follow Sherry on Facebook as well as check out Talking Trash with Sherry and Derek. Just before we went to the break, you just had mentioned it's funny that I get a lot of flack about the not voting thing too. And my first question to these people is, why would you want me to vote? I'm certainly not going to vote for anything you want.
Right. They pressure you into voting and then they get mad at you if you vote like libertarian or green or something and say it ruined their, like, for one, I always say to people, I don't know you, my vote. Like, they want to say you got to vote your conscience. It's your vote. Well, if it's mine, then I can do with it what I wish. Right. And I wish to not participate in that system. So that's always a good little conversation to get into with people. And you can't hardly blame people for being locked into a system that has been so promoted in, it's like they give you this little bitty opportunity to go and cast your ballot and say that it's like you having a say in things. But really, do you get a say? Like, I don't know. When was the last time I voted to not have people go to war? Like, I don't get a say in those things. I don't get a say in the really important things, the truly important things. And so I don't want to be a part of, especially federally. Now, I used to be a sort of Lysander Spooner defensive voting type. And I understand that position, and I wouldn't say it's completely wrong. Maybe locally, although I don't vote locally either. But I'm certainly not going to vote on a national level, because those people, and you can take a look back on how it happens from, Reagan on. Each president bombs more people, does more things, and it keeps going. It doesn't get smaller. The military industrial complex doesn't get smaller, and it doesn't stop. I mean, there's a lot of bought and paid for politicians out there that keep that going. And I'm not going to be a party to that. If you cast your vote for someone and you put them in a position to be able to be a part of the Leviathan that does those things, then guess what? You've actually consented to that. You've actually said, yes, I'm behind that as well. Because where does the buck stop? Where does the responsibility stop, if not with you, and saying, well, I don't consent to that. I don't want my sons, and I'm certainly not sacrificing my children on the altar of this country. And I don't want other people sacrificed in that way for, rich guys and Halliburton and politicians to make money, or to steal resources from other places. So, where does your more moral agency lie in that? I think you have to recognize that you are a part of that if you are involved in it.
Well, if it's such an important thing, if it's so important that we get out there and we vote, that shouldn't it be actually principled? Shouldn't it be something that there's some value placed in it, and it's not just something that you show up at the polls every 2 or 4 years and choose from who's there? If these people were serious about the importance of the vote and what it means to the population and what it means to pick a president, then they would do more than just vote.
Right.
They would participate in the process, if nothing else.
Right. And they would actually start recalling some of these people when they do things that they're not supposed to do. But, it's easy to stand by and say, well, it's not really affecting me here too much. I mean, that's part of how the system, it sort of covers you up. Like, I don't know if I necessarily believe that there's a bunch of guys in a back room, smoking cigars and planning, here's how I'm going to make Sherry's life bad. But the whole system, the way it works together, certainly oppresses people. And because of that, like you say, oh, the ATF, well, they murdered some people out in Waco, it was terrible and I hate it, but it didn't really affect me. No, that's when every person who claims that they are for freedom should have been in the streets and saying this is crap, and we're not going to take this, but comfort is complacent. We often get really complacent, and so a lot of comfortable people.
It's absolutely true. We have to go into the top of the hour, and then we'll come back and we'll talk with Sherry Voluntary about mental health and the COVID-19 reality. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. We are off with hour number 2. Sherry Voluntary is my guest next week. Felony Melanie will be on the show. Craig Hargis kicks off 2021. We'll talk about Christian anarchy and the compatibility of those ideas there. And then my friend, author, economist Bradley Thomas will be back on the show, and we will take advantage of him for the first time. And I will use him as an economist to tell y'all that I'm right about all these things that I talk about, money and economics and when I first reached out to Sherry, it was I wasn't sure at any time what it is that I want to talk with to someone. I just want to talk to them. They're out there, they're doing their thing, they're writing their book, they're hosting their show, they're making their documentary, whatever it is. I just want to talk about them and what they're doing and how it works for them and why they do it, what some of the motivation is behind the things that they do. And so it was great when Sherry brought up the topic of talking about mental health and COVID-19, because it's something that I've skirted around the issue myself in talking about it on the show, because I don't really know. I only have my own sort of feelings about it. I have my wife and my family and their feelings about it, and maybe coworkers. And just I hate to do a third party sort of anecdotal thing about the masks, but I heard this happened this week to somebody that I know where they were actually having a conversation with somebody in the store and they did not realize who it was that they were talking to. They actually knew the person under the mask and they didn't realize until they said, "Bye, Mom."
Wow.
That it was their own daughter they're talking. And I know it sounds fantastic, but I don't have any reason to disbelieve the story given the source.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sort of thing. That's the that's the tip of the iceberg of the mental health crisis, I think. And so when you brought up that topic, I was like, yes, let's run with that. Let's talk about that because I know there are a lot of people that are scared. The media is feeding the panic. The government is incompetent and corrupt. And people are scared and they don't know what to do in this pandemic.
Right. Yeah, I think the human connection is one that has been probably far underestimated by people, especially, I mean, a lot of us libertarian types are more, I'm not an introvert, but a lot are introvert. I would say a good, majority of libertarians are. And maybe the connection to people has not been as noticed as being as important, but it really is for all of us. That's community is really important, and have people that understand you, and just to see the face of someone you love or someone you care about or are friends with. That's a nice little pick me up. You see people smiling at you. Those things matter, and people like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and other people like that have been telling us for years how important a smile is, how that affects other people's mood, how that makes you present yourself to them. So to now say, well, it doesn't matter, just wear the mask, it really has a bigger impact on people than I think they're wanting to admit. And people are feeling pretty, you can be in like that feeling. I don't know if you've ever had it where you're in a crowd of people, but you still feel alone. Like, that's what everybody's experiencing constantly. It's like one more layer against the world. And I think it's really interesting when you look at the psychology of masks as well. When, people have their face covered, it's often like what happens with people being behind a computer screen. They'll say things that they would not normally say if they're talking to you. They won't engage you in the same way. There have been lots of studies on that in, different religious cultures where they'll wear a mask and go into trances or dance, whatever, to inhabit their gods or however it works. But that being behind a mask, it separates you. Like, you feel more separate from you can be a different person. And so I think that's something not to underestimate as well. The fact that, we have so many people that are covering their faces up now, and maybe they feel like they're a little more free to be a little more aggressive towards, those who aren't masking themselves. So
and I think they're just being more aggressive in general. I think that's absolutely true. I've been playing the game myself, and one of the things that I have purposely done is embrace the idea of wearing a mask as being a costume, as being sort of playing this sort of role when I go out into public now.
Yeah.
So I imagine that is definitely the case with other people, and that's what brings this conversation up, is because I know that if I'm dealing with these things myself, that if I feel these things, that I see them, that I'm not the only person that sees them. And so that people need to be discussing this particular issue, because we're not being told anything positive in regard to the mask situation or the COVID situation in general. Right now, we're going through a phase where people are getting this first round of vaccinations, and who knows where this is going to lead. It's scary, the potential health concerns that will arise out of this in the coming years. But it's still a real-time thing that people are having to go through and having to deal with. And because so many people are just going along with it, and they're just accepting what is happening at face value and not questioning it, there's not a lot of people to turn to talk to and have a reasoned conversation about, well, why are we doing this?
Right. Yeah. Especially when they say, well, when the vaccine comes, then we can get back to normal. And then now the goalpost once again has been moved. Well, can we get back? Do I have to wear a mask now? Yeah, you still have to wear a mask. You can still be contagious. You still have to it's insane. So what's the point in doing that anyways? And I know that there's a group, and I forget what they're called. It's like the doctors on the front lines of America, or America's Frontline Doctors, and they're a group that supports doctors being able to run their practices without the interference of government or other interests, say pharmaceutical companies or whatever. And they just released something saying, if you're 0 to 20, it's prohibitive. You shouldn't take the vaccine because you don't need it. You're at very, very low risk, exceedingly low, they called it. And then 20 to 5, if you're healthy, it's strongly discouraged. But when it gets them to 50 to 69 category and 50 or 70 plus, they prohibit it because the normal treatment for COVID is less risky to you than the vaccine is, because the vaccine is an unknown. They don't know what it's going to do to you. So they're saying, look, as physicians, and we're saying this, that you shouldn't take this if you're healthy, because look, you have a better chance of surviving if you get COVID and get the treatment.
But that's not the general feeling.
No.
That's not the general consensus that we're given. That may be understood. It may be absolutely 100% factual, but everybody else is out here pushing, say, oh, we're going to get it.
Right.
There was this terrible picture of a nurse falling out after having a conversation, just getting the shot, and then her brain sort of short-circuited on camera, and she fell out. And somebody was talking to me about the palsy thing and suggested that, the Bell's palsy, that some people in the trials had contracted Bell's palsy, and suggested that one of the people that had contracted it hadn't even been given the shot, that they had been given a saline solution or some other placebo. And my point was, that's still somebody getting something injected into their skin and bypassing all these other areas that would otherwise protect that, keep that from getting into your body, and can cause you to short circuit, cause that brain to short circuit, cause that palsy, that inability of those muscles to function.
Right. It's almost like there's nothing that they're willing to undergo, or there's nothing that they're not willing to undergo to stay safe, for this idea of safety. And it's like, look, you can see what it's doing to people. I had someone, when presented with the video of the nurse fainting, said, oh, well, that's probably because she's, lots of people pass out when they get shots or whatever. Like, yeah, at the point of getting the shot, not 5 minutes later when they're up and talking. And like there's so many things that, like, I'm a person who thinks you should, what's the most reasonable explanation for this? That's what you should probably look for. But when this is happening and you're seeing that these people are constantly telling you to do things that go against your own self-interest, the politicians are not scared of this thing, you guys. Like, they're not even following their own mandates. So where's the point? Where do you draw the line that says, I'm not willing to just undergo whatever oppression, whatever kind of power grab they're going to do to me, or things that they're going to make me do in order to stay safe? Like, when did freedom ever equal safety? They're not synonyms. They never have been. And I would rather live my life than live it in fear of getting something. Like, people are really delaying all the good things in life for some. And this is another thing that I've never have they ever approached a disease, a pandemic in this manner. It's never been where you lock down all the healthy people. I mean, before this came about, when you would see the anti-vaxxers and the vaxxers arguing with each other, it was always about herd immunity, right? People would say, you need to get vaccinated for herd immunity, and blah. And now it's like that whole concept has just disappeared. And that's actually what you need. You need healthy people getting this and carrying it, so that because they won't die. They might or might not get sick, but it will buffer those who are unhealthy. I have a friend who, her daughter and my daughter are friends, and she works in this field, and she has a friend that works for the CDC. So it's kind of secondhand information, but she said he was telling me he was on the Ebola eradication team, and that, for one, when they stepped in and they said, hey, we want to work on this, we've experienced this, we know how to deal with pandemics, they said, no, thank you, we don't need you. And then the second thing was, he said everything they're doing is contrary to what we did to eradicate Ebola. Everything they're doing is contrary to how you've always worked. You don't lock down healthy people. You quarantine people who are ill, and it's in their best interest to do so. You don't have to force people to do something in their best interest generally. So you keep the ill people away, but then you let the society get it, so it's not being carried all the time everywhere. So that says to me, what's the other reason for doing this? There's got to be another agenda. I mean, and it's not in this weird, what people would consider conspiracy theory, crazy stuff. Like, look, this is real life. You can see it happening in front of your face. So why is it that they're doing something different? And that every time it's a cycle with the way they do it, because every time they go off a lockdown, then it explodes again. And so they have those numbers to kind of make you afraid again. And we just have to start using our critical thinking better. Like, that's
Well, if
our part.
you all but said you're generally an Occam's razor sort of individual. That if this is the most likely reason that something happened, then that's probably why it's happening. So, in the case of the lockdowns, in the case of this continuing to spread like it is, you have to wonder. You have to look at it and go, well, is there not one sane person along the way who said, wait a minute, stop, this is not how we do these things, unless you actually want the opposite of what you're trying to do?
Yeah. And look, I'm not an academic. I'm not even well versed in all the science that's goes against what the mainstream is saying. I just can look at things and say, wait a second, this isn't how they've done it before. Why are they doing it differently? And of course, when they come out of lockdown, the numbers are going to explode because people are mingling again. Like, it's been crazy. But
well, I would suggest on the conspiracy side of things that there is a push to introduce and to create and make and normalize these mRNA vaccinations, this DNA altering, protein injecting idea that they've come up with, that they've been messing around with for the last few years. And there is one other example, or there may be others, but there's one specific example of exactly how this has been handling. And I said this back at the beginning of this, early in the year, February or March or something, that we were watching in real time the sort of panic, ignorance, and manipulation that causes people to believe that vaccines work. And another example of this is what happened with polio. And if you look at what's being done as far as the manipulations of testing, as far as the manipulations of results, the fact that it's a multi-part vaccine, we're looking at exactly the same thing that happened with the polio vaccine. And if you understand that, even just a little bit of that, you understand how much of a manipulation that was to get people to believe that vaccine was actually changing lives. It was helping cripple some people, is what it was doing.
And I think a friend of mine he's a natural health care professional, and he would know better than I would, but he told me, like, polio wasn't eradicated. They just call it something else now. Like, that's the thing. They just call it something else. And like the government often does, is when they get involved with something, they have to, say what they did was great. And so therefore, let's just change the metric a little, and or change what we call it. And it's really, it can be so crazy making. Like, for people who are paying attention, it can really be crazy. And like, you look at people like Bill Gates. Why is Bill Gates the leading academic? Like, he's not. Who is he? Nobody elected him, that's for sure. People who are into elected officials, nobody elected him. He's not. Why is this? The man that has been talking about there are too many people on the planet for years. He really has bought into this idea that, the climate, it's all about climate change, right? Everything comes down to climate change with these people because it's their religion. And that if we had fewer people on the planet, we could just have a utopia. And all of a sudden, he's the guy that's leading the charge on the vaccine stuff. I mean, like, that's scary. That's the scary stuff when you actually see it. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, when I started seeing stuff about Bill Gates years ago, I was just like, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's kind of, it's fringe, whatever. And he's not really going to get. And then look where it is. So You
Well,
know,
yeah, the word eugenicist applies, I believe, and I
yes,
believe that his family has a history of it. So but there's no reason to believe that the one guy who for many many years has been walking around talking about reducing the population of the planet and bringing things like the climate under control, all of a sudden is going to save the planet with his miracle vaccines and funding
right,
it. Yeah, it seems a little silly to me.
right. Yeah, it is silly. And to see it, happening in real time and to see how people are just accepting it. The information is there, but it's easier to just go along with the mainstream. It's easier to just like, I mean, there are times when I'll wear a mask when I'm going out because I don't want this to stop me from being able to live my life. But there are other times I don't wear a mask when I'm just like, I'm okay today. Most of the time, if I'm going to the grocery store, I won't because I know they won't do anything. But there have been people who like stopped my ex-husband in there one day and you should be wearing a mask, and he just like went on. But it you have to determine your level of what we were talking about mental health. I don't want to fight every day of my life. And that's being an anarchist, we're already on the outside most of the time. Like there's not a lot of groups where people really get us. And so, some days you just want to be able to go and do what you want to do without the hassle. And I guess that's, a compromise, but I certainly I think you're your first priority, right? You and your mental state. And if you need to go out and do something with like my daughter, she likes to go to these stores in the mall that have anime stuff. And so, and to go inside, I don't wear one inside the big part of the mall, but to go into the actual stores, you have to wear a mask. So I'll put on my mask and we'll go in there and I'll have a nice time with my daughter looking at her anime stuff. Because look, the world has shifted enough, right? Like there's enough crazy stuff going on that I want to at least continue the things that are good in my life and to continue to keep those relationships sweet.
And that's going to be the key to keeping people healthy. And this is another thing that I said early on is that it's kind of reversing one of their things, and that was they wanted to separate us. Well, they brought us home, and now we can make those home relationships stronger. We'll come back and we'll wrap it up with Share Voluntary right here on Toward Anarchy. I mean, everyone loves that one. That's just classic right there. I remember as a kid watching it and really loving the show, even before I understood what those words really meant at the beginning of it. Yeah,
The Prisoner.
Yes.
Yeah, most people I've ever talked to don't know what it is. I'm like, oh my God, you have to see it. It's so good. I started watching it before I was even an anarchist, and now it's like even better. So.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but I haven't watched it as an adult. I mean, I grew up watching it on BBC, flipping to
Right.
Channel 6 in Denver, 6 or 12, depending on. And yeah, I mean, it was impressive. It was neat. The entire concept of
Right.
the subterfuge and then being stuck out on the island and all
Even
the.
its style is very different.
Oh yeah.
It's very artistically done. So.
Yeah, well, it's very indicative of the time it was created for sure.
Yeah.
Even though it was sort of reflecting a kind of almost a futuristic reality in and of itself. So yeah, what an amazing show. Yeah, one that's still the watches all these years later. Tell me about your show, this Talking Trash.
Talking Trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was sort of an idea that a friend of mine, Derek Truesdell, and I had to just, it's more on the lighter side. Like I do a lot of stuff in I hate to say political realm, but that's what people understand. In the philosophical realm is what I'd like to say. But and it can get wearing, like that's part of protecting your mental health is to get outside of it a little bit sometimes, because I know I can tend to hyper fixate on things, and you have to step back every once in a while and just realize, okay, there are still a lot of good things in the world and I still have a lot of good things going on, and just find those things to be thankful for. So we decided to do this show that's just sort of, we get on and we start drinking and we talk about just whatever people are talking, like water cooler type talks. A lot of times it does get into more political subjects or whatever, but we try to keep it light and funny and just have a good time. it started out of a live stream I had been doing because I quit doing the Sherry Voluntary show. It's kind of on hiatus. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it anymore or not. Last year in December. And when all this happened and people were really feeling lonely, I thought, well, my producer and I were like, let's get online and just do a live stream and talk to people. So I started doing that every Saturday, and then it sort of turned into this. And now we're trying to do it every other Saturday, just for fun.
Why do you think that you put the Sherry Voluntary show on hiatus? Are you feeling the weight of it, or do you not? Are you thinking that you'd rather just put the energy someplace else? Is there a particular reason?
Well, I was going through kind of a divorce at the time, so
okay.
that was a big thing. And just I needed to step back. I needed a little bit less on my plate because homeschool and do this stuff and do public speaking events and things. And so I just needed some time away. And plus, I put how much it takes to put into a show. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot more than people really consider when you're just a consumer. And so I spent a lot of hours, and just the financial part of that wasn't paying off for me to spend that much time away from my kids doing this. So I'm really bad about, I know part of it was my problem because I was really bad about saying, if you like the show, support it, that kind of thing. But I would encourage all your listeners to support your show and that's the way we're going to get the content we want, is to support it. And so I might give it another go. There are times when I really wish I had it, was doing it again. We'll see.
It's a love-hate thing, especially when you're talking about in this sort of mode where you're not necessarily interacting with people and there's no immediate feedback. There's all that time, that downtime between shows to think about how bad you presented that last idea, all the things that you didn't talk about. And one of the things that I immediately decided on this show, I within the first couple episodes is that I would not try to be everything to everyone, that I would just pick the few things that I was finding interesting, and that was it. That was the and everything else would just be off the cuff, and that way it was a less pressure of me trying to actually produce something for somebody else, as opposed to me just coming on and talking to and about the things that I think are important.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that kind of method. If I did it again, I don't know that I would, I was weekly for a long time, and I don't know, maybe I would lighten up on that a little bit and do just when I had something. Maybe I wanted to get out there. But, people have asked me if I'm going to do it again. There are times when I go, well, man, I really would like to talk about this, but I'll just say, I have a friend who'll let me come on their show and talk about it.
Oh, isn't it so nice? Isn't it nice getting invited on other people's shows? They have to worry about all the production, everything. Sherry, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It was great getting the chance to talk to you.
Thank you.
WardAnarchy.com. As always, that's the place to follow along. If you were wondering, it was December 20th in my world when I was doing this live. I just got finished talking with Sherry Voluntary. What a fantastic conversation. Just one of these voices that I had want to bring to you for quite some time. And finally, this last sort of go around of looking for some new and different people that I hadn't talked to yet, I was able to get to her and a number of these other people that I have on this long list from this last time that I reached out and just asked, who am I supposed to be talking to? What am I supposed to be talking about? And that's not in an effort to be everything to everyone. That's in an effort to find the things that I'm not seeing, the things that I'm not talking about, the people that I'm not talking to, because I don't know that they're there. Or even if I do know that they're there, that I haven't been able to get them yet, and maybe reaching out one more time will get the attention of somebody, and we can get them to come be a guest on the show and talk about these important issues, no matter what they be, whether it's mental health or just the need, the ability to communicate with people, and the changing needs of communication, the the fact that we live in the attention span has never been shorter than it has been now with the introduction, the continued growth of social media. You only have that split second to really catch somebody's attention. It's just that fast. It's a scroll, it's a swipe, it's just that fast, and so it's really important to hit on the things that people will notice. There's, they're going to be talking about certain things, and they're going to be paying attention to certain ideas, things that are going on in the news cycle or in society, or that are philosophically valid or interesting, that people are paying attention to. They're heightenedly aware to it, and getting their attention can be tough, especially if you're not specifically trying to really hit their thing. And a lot of people are real specialized and they have a certain subset of knowledge, or just a certain subset of society or culture that they want to participate in. And I absolutely get it. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that you only just have that quick second to catch somebody's attention. And so anytime somebody is doing it, I want to know how. I want to know what it is that they're saying, why it is that they're getting the attention that they're getting and people are listening to their ideas. What is the value in it that everybody can take away, because everybody wants to be heard. They feel the need on some level for whatever it is, whether it's their emotional needs, or whether it's this amazing idea that they have, or whether it's their favorite television show that they watch, or their favorite game that they play, whatever it is, they want to talk to other people about it. And it's and looking for people who do it successfully, finding people who do it successfully with some of the more important and divisive topics. It's a topic that came up this week, I guess, and that is kind of gnawing at me a little bit, because I will come out and I will suggest to you that if you want to achieve anything resembling a true equality for people, that you get rid of the political class. They're these people who think that equality is achieved through the forced redistribution of wealth and the destruction of the individual and their right to self-determination. The political class, the voters, the people that really truly believe that you can transfer authority to a collective when you don't have that authority as an individual. And I'll use that word equality in trying to reach true equality in that sense. And somebody will say, I don't want equality, I want diversity, that there's no such thing as equality, and that you can't ever achieve it, that it's a dangerous thing to try to strive for. And I get that conversation, I get that response, but the thing is that I'm not talking about an equality of outcome. I'm talking about an equality of opportunity. I'm talking about no leech class. When I'm talking about the political class, I'm talking about people who live off of everybody else and also rule them at the same time. I'm talking about having no political authority that gives itself some legal preference in society. It's equal opportunity. It's equal footing to begin with in the greater scheme of the world, recognizing that the individual has that right to the self-determination, and that where they don't cross other people, that there's no reason any other person should be involved in their business involuntarily. If they bring you in and you want to get involved, then you do so. Otherwise, everybody goes about their life like they do every minute of every single day, concerning most of the rest of the world, without any consideration for what other people think of it, let alone and any kind of authority or a system, as it were. So we're talking about equality of opportunity, the beginnings of opportunity and equality, not the outcome. Not saying that you have to take everything and divide it up evenly, or determine somehow through some magical formula who are the right people that get to decide who will determine that for everybody, or this resource or that bit of money or that bit of food or whatever it is, and who it will go to. And so I'm speaking of that, that the terms, in the terms of opportunity and not outcome. And then there'll be another response to it. Well, equality again, in terms of outcome, is something that you can't really truly try to achieve. You certainly can't do it third hand, second hand, third hand, fourth hand, through force, through taxation. It doesn't work. It's obvious that these things don't work. That voluntary cooperation is much more successful at these things. So I get that. But then that same person will say that diversity is a myth, and that's one that makes me think for a minute. That makes me stop for a minute, and I don't agree. Because I mean, of course, I agree that the equality of outcome thing is impossible to strive towards. So I'm definitely talking about that equality of opportunity, particularly within the society. But these systems of voluntary cooperation without a centralized authoritarian political or legal class that plunders the rest of us. But the diversity thing. I don't think that diversity is a myth. I absolutely do believe that there are some things that are called diversity that are claimed to be diverse that are definitely myths, though. Because I mean, before, to talk about words, and to be real specific about the choice of words and what I mean when I'm saying something, before diversity was this sort of politically correct forced inclusion of the different types of people, races, homosexuality, whatever it is, or any absolute difference in somebody, they have to be included because that makes diversity. Before, the definition of diversity was that it was variety. It was just being composed of different elements or qualities of elements. But then even that doesn't, there's the connotative meaning that they want you, that the people who would hijack diversity as a word, and they want you to believe that diversity means that they're bringing something special, something different to the table. So that's the connotative meaning of diversity, right? And so this is my own personal observation, and I have to be real careful where I tread on this, because I don't want to offend anybody. That's never my intent. I'll offend your ideas, and that's what I'm offending right now. The idea that diversity is something that can be achieved just simply by including people of different color, or of a different race, or of a different sexual proclivity. These things do not make one diverse, is the point that I'm getting at. We've all seen the bumper sticker, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You can picture it in your mind, right? It's the word diversity is done in the rainbow colors. And this to me is confusing, because you wouldn't just include a white man and say that it's diverse to include a white man. Particularly these people in these crowds that tend to use the word diversity in this fashion, in the sense of that it has to be forced on us, that we can't just accept it for what it is, and that diversity includes itself. You don't have to include diversity. I think that social and political and economic experiments, both in running nations and in the laboratory, if you will, in the microcosm of studying the ideas throughout history, prove that it doesn't work. That forced inclusion, that forced diversity doesn't improve things. That because of the natural tendency of markets, of individuals, of ideas to go the route of least resistance, I guess, is a good way to look at it. These things will resurface in other ways. where you force there to be more males included in the nursing industry, there will be an equal natural pushback to that, where every single individual involved in it, every single manipulation of it is pushing against the natural way it would tend anyway. And so what happens when you force these things is you see that it doesn't really change those numbers on the outside. You get extremes. And we've talked about this before. You get extremes on left or right, or top or bottom, or overly scientific, or completely dismissing science, overly religious, completely dismissing. I'm talking about extremes, whereas everything is, including this, is in the middle. Variety. If you want variety for diversity, going to the extremes, the ones that are actually sort of waving a flag and saying, "Woohoo! Look at me, I'm different," really aren't the ones that are different. They're extreme, and I guess you can say they are different, but they don't fit the real definition, the meaning that that diversity is something more than just being different, that it's supposed to be better than just being different, that it's supposed to bring something to the table that makes everything else better. And that's a very good point. Should I consider that they don't want, that the people who push these ideas don't want there to actually be an equality, that they don't want things to get better? And that's definitely I think that there's definitely a subset of people who are certainly pushing for that, whether you call them the manipulators, New World Order, working for a divide and conquer sort of approach to things. There's absolutely those, but I think what's worse is I think that it's obvious. I think that it's glaringly obvious that there are too many tools. And by tools, I'm talking about people, and I'm talking about them being tools, and I'm talking about them being used for nefarious means, or it just in their own being a tool, in their own existence, they necessarily aren't principled, that they don't have any other concern for the things that they even claim themselves are important, like we were talking about voting earlier. If it's so important to you, then why is the only thing that you actually do when it comes to voting is just show up and vote? There's so much more to the process than that. If you're going to be a voter, I mean, you should invest the time. You should make it a principled action. You shouldn't just vote because it's party. You shouldn't just vote because that's what you think that is best for other people, even though you might not feel that way, particularly about yourself. That might happen more, say, on the less conservative side with people voting for something like Roe v. Wade, where the institutionalized abortion, institutionalized, centralized, federalized control of a major healthcare decision becomes codified, gets written into law. It gets turned into a political and economic weapon that has left an ungodly number of unborn people, particularly of different persuasions in this nation. And those people are probably the same people who their culture, their reality, their society that they live in would actually push for more of the things that enable that institutionalized approach to fixing problems instead of actually addressing problems. It's the same problem that we have going on with the medical pharma industry in its attempts to market things as medicine, to market things as cures when they so oftentimes don't actually address the root problem. Vaccines are a very good example of that. Vaccines don't actually address the root problem. They don't address the health problem. They don't address the fact that the virus, depending on what you believe and what your understanding of is of virology and germ theory, that the virus is external, and so that trying to fix something on the inside of you isn't even it doesn't fix the problem. That problem is an external problem. It still exists out there in the world. If that's the argument, and that's what most people believe, I can't have that other conversation right now about the germ theory thing, just because too nuanced, and I don't have that much time. In fact, we're gonna have to go back and wrap this thing up. It does make you crazy. You're just supposed to shut your brain off, take the pill, and go back to sleep. To plug you back into the matrix, and remember that ignorance is bliss. It'll all be just a horrible, horrible dream that you had. I want to remember nothing, nothing. That's what Cypher says when he says he wants to be plugged back into the matrix, when he's talking to Mr. Smith about betraying the group and getting the codes to Zion. I can't get you the codes, but I can get you the man who knows them, and he wants to be plugged back in for that exchange, and he doesn't want to remember anything. Because it's a bit of a burden once you realize the manipulations that go on throughout society and the political class and the elites, if you will, the social manipulations that take place, and the fact that the squeaky wheels are the ones that get the grease and get the most attention. And so, again, these extremes on both ends, manipulating everything, where the rest of us are just sort of here in the middle, just trying to get along fine and do the things that we want to do and be the people that we want to be. TowardAnarchy.com. Coming up next week, Felony Melanie wraps up the year with us. Another one of these great female voices, just another perspective. They all are just another perspective of the world and some of these ideas and things that we talk about: voluntarism, anarchy, libertarianism, conservatism. Believe it or not, it's absolutely there. Craig Hargis is he'll be my guest, first guest of the year. I guess the third, I suppose that would be. And we'll talk Christian anarchy. It's just an interesting concept, an interesting conversation that I've always been interested in, because there are people who make the argument that Christ was a voluntarist, an anarchist, that he was bucking the system, and there's some truth to that, and there's some other evidence to suggest that he was just he was another one of the tools in the manipulation used by the people that were in charge at the time. So what are you going to do but enjoy the conversation and try to learn something new, find out that perspective. And then we're booked for weeks out, but on the 10th, author economist Bradley Thomas is back on the show. Looking forward to that. We'll pick up some conversations that we've had before, and I intend to use him, as I said, as I have not before, and that's in validating a number of these things. It never occurred to me to do that. I just wanted to talk to the guy about his articles and about the stuff that he wrote, and the fact that he's been coming back on the show has just been awesome. Because we get along. So we'll bring him back to talk about his perspective next week. Melanie on the show. Until then, you take care.